All right, everyone. Welcome to the Cleveland and Detroit Selection Day prep session. Today is October 30th. If you're joining this call, you were invited to be a finalist for our selection days either in Cleveland, Ohio, or Detroit, Michigan. And the purpose of this call tonight is to help get you ready to share a little bit more about what selection day is, but not too much, and give you an opportunity to learn more about the cities that you'll be going to with fellows and alumni who are in that city. So before we get started, I want to do some quick introductions. First, I'll introduce myself, and then we'll go down the line of our fellow and alumni panelists. I am Winston Law. You probably received a lot of emails from me. I was born and raised in Seattle, and I attended Middlebury College in Vermont, where I studied geography and had a minor in French. So I was very a little artsy, and I was really interested in social entrepreneurship and making an impact through entrepreneurial thinking and design thinking and all that type of stuff. And that's why I joined Venture for America as a fellow. And I did my fellowship here in Detroit, Michigan, where I still live. And I currently work full-time as the talent manager for Venture for America. Next, we have Paula.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paula. I am also in Detroit. I've been here for about 4 years with the fellowship and now as an alum. So I moved here in 2015. I originally started my fellowship at a tech startup and then moved from there to work at a foundation. And now I work at the city of Detroit as a program manager in the mayor's office and the planning department. Originally grew up on the East Coast, went to school at MIT and studied engineering with urban planning as a strong focus. So was really eager to apply those engineering planning skills, and BFA kind of fit really well into that. And yeah, had my eye on Detroit for a long time, and I'm really glad to be here and don't plan on leaving anytime soon. So great to meet you all, and excited to get to know a little bit more about you guys and why BFA is so interesting to you all.
Thanks, Paula. Up next, we have Molly.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. My name is Molly, and unlike Paula, I have not had as long of a Detroit journey, but I'm a 2018 fellow, graduated from St. Louis University, where I studied business management and globalization, so kind of like a mix of international studies and entrepreneurship, things like that. I was very interested in social enterprise. So I took a job with Rebel Nell, which was a jewelry company that employs women facing barriers to employment in Detroit, and was there for about 15 months. And just recently accepted a job at Cuba Candela, which is another Venture for America company in Miami. Happy to talk about the reason I switched, and also happy to say it has nothing to do with Detroit and definitely more with just being a better alignment with my career goals.
Thanks, Molly. And last but definitely not least, Anna.
Hi, everyone. So unlike all of the rest of the three of them, I actually have had not much of a Detroit experience at all. I am from the Cleveland area, and I actually went to school at John Carroll, where I just graduated in May. I had a degree in marketing as well as entrepreneurship and peace, justice, and human rights. So kind of a funky mix there where I would always get asked, what are you going to do after graduation with that? And stumbled upon VFA, and it ended up being that perfect fit. I'm able to take all the things that I learned in school and implement it into what I do. So I stuck around Cleveland. I love this city. I can talk to you just about as much as you want about it. If you're coming here for selection day, I will be here. And so I would love to talk about all the fun things we can do around the city. But I work at Wiser, which is actually a tech startup for colleges where we help to connect peers and alumni to make sure that college students have the best experience they can. So really aligned with what I wanted to do, really aligned with my goals. And yeah, I'm happy to be on the other side of things now this year, being able to help all of you figure out what you want to do.
Thank you, Anna. All right, now I'm going to talk about what we're going to cover for the next remaining hour. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about selection day and what you can expect, as well as some logistics. I'm going to share some tips and best practices about selection day and how to approach interviewing. And then at the end, I'll do a quick fellow spotlight where I'm going to ask some questions that I've prepared for the fellows and alumni on the call tonight, and then open it up to any questions that you might have about selection day, about their experiences in Detroit and Cleveland. So up first is an overview about selection day. So this slide is introductions, but it's supposed to say like what the day is going to be like, so apologize for that. But basically what the day will look like is when you arrive, you'll have some time just to eat breakfast and get ready for the day. But the bulk of the morning will be group activities. So you'll be in rooms with 4 to 6 finalists, working on teams, about 5 activities, and you'll have a break in case you need to go to the bathroom or take care of anything. You won't know these groups until you get there, so there's nothing you should do to prepare for that, but just be ready to show up as how you would work best in a team. You'll then have a lunch that we'll provide for you, and we will have a lunchtime presentation with a member of the Venture for America team to just give you a better sense of what VFA is and answer any questions you might have before your 30 to 40 minute individual panel interviews with our volunteer judges in the afternoon. And you'll basically be assigning each other when you'll be doing these interviews at the end of the group activities. So everyone does get an opportunity to have a 1 on 4 or 5 person interview where you'll reflect on what happened in the morning, as well as to share more about why you're interested in the VFA. You'll also have an opportunity to share your preferences for the roles, industries, and location that you'd want to apply for companies through Venture for America. And you'll be receiving a match preferences sheet that will allow you to indicate to us your interests in terms of role, industry, and location. And we'll be asking you questions about that as well. At the end of both Cleveland and Detroit selection days, there's going to be events. So for Cleveland selection day, there will be a demo day, which will be the culmination of the Venture for America Accelerator in Cleveland, Ohio. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But then if you're going to Detroit selection day, we're hosting a happy hour at the end of the day from 5 to 6. And it's important, and I want to stress for everyone that it is optional. We want to see you there, but it is very much optional. If you have a flight to catch to make it back home or back to college, please take care of yourself and what you need to do on that front. So in terms of logistics, keep in mind that these are subject to change. So please pay attention to emails from my colleague Florence or Vanessa in your inbox in case anything changes. But the schedule for both days will roughly be arrival at 8:30. There will be a light continental breakfast. So if there's something else you want to eat so that you can feel extra prepared, go ahead and do that. But you'll basically be at selection day from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. So it is a long day, and encourage you to rest up and do what you need to do to feel prepared. We will provide lunch. So if you haven't registered yet, you will submit your dietary restrictions and anything that we need to know ahead of time so that we can make sure that we are fulfilling your needs as much as we can. And then the location for both those selection days are at the Global Center of Health and Innovation and at One Campus Martius and other buildings in Detroit. And because if you're going to Detroit Selection Day, we will be walking from a few different buildings, I encourage you to bring rain gear because weather here in Michigan is unpredictable. So I encourage you to be prepared for that. Be prepared for clean as well, but because you're basically gonna be in one building for most of the day, it's less pertinent. And then for those optional after Selection Day events, like I mentioned, there's the VFA Accelerated Demo Day, which will be 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The VFA Accelerator is a 4-month experience that our alumni can apply to. And basically we provide our fellows who are in that program, who are ready to go full-time in their company, 4 months of a place to live, as well as a 4-month living stipend and access to resources and mentors and just the time to work on their companies. So Demo Day is sort of the culmination of their 4 months of the VFA Accelerator, where they'll be pitching their company. So really excited for everyone going to Cleveland Selection to have an opportunity to see sort of the outcomes that we hope for as a nonprofit organization with our fellows and alumni. For Detroit, unfortunately, there's no demo day. However, we do hope to see you at the optional happy hour as well. All right. If you have questions about logistics, feel free to message me and I can address them in the Q&A. So wanted to also go over some tips and best practices for Selection Day. And a lot of you are probably thinking about, like, what are we looking for? How can I best prepare? And what I'll say is something that I share with people throughout the entire process is that we're looking for 3 main things that you'll see here. The first one being your mission and programmatic alignment. As an organization that is working to build the next generation of entrepreneurs, we're really hoping to find people who are excited to live, work, and invest in a Venture for America city for at least 2 years. and are wanting to work at a for-profit startup on the pathway to becoming a startup leader or an entrepreneur in their own right. So that is what we're looking for, and the best way to prepare for that is continuing to learn more about Venture for America. Being on this call is a great way to do that, as well as reflecting on your own experiences and why this makes sense for you. The second thing we look for is your ability to contribute to a startup. So in terms of going through the match process and finding a job and joining a company and being a high value add employee, we really want to make sure that the fellows that we select are going to be successful in finding a job and then adding a lot of value when they do work at their startup for at least 2 years. The best way to prepare for this is to continue to think about, how you have shown up as a leader in different organizations. Have you made an impact? Reflections about those things will go a long way. And the last thing that we look for are character traits like integrity, positivity, and resilience. Those are things that we hold to be near and dear in our community, but also things that are really important traits to have in the startup world. An example of the importance of resilience is your job description might say X and Y thing, and then you get to your job, and then you do X and Y things, as well as A, B, and C. So want to make sure that you're able to be flexible and resilient when things shift and change and are challenging. We're there to support and coach fellows, but things in VFA are very fellow driven. So happy to answer more questions about that, but wanted to also move on to some other tips, tricks, and best practices. So really want you to show up, and you'll hear this at selection day in the morning, but really want you to just be authentic and be who you actually are. That's going to be the best way for you and our team to see you in action and see if you'd be able to thrive in Venture for America. We want to select fellows who would be able to make the most of the experience, invest in the community, and just be a part of what we're trying to build. The next thing is continuing to do research about Venture for America. Again, being on this call is a great thing. And use the STAR method for interviewing, which I'll get into in the next slide, but making sure that you're really able to talk about your experiences succinctly. And finally, encourage everyone to get plenty of rest and fuel up and do what you need to do to feel really excited about the day. Hopefully, the day will be a growth experience professionally for you all, and also an opportunity for you to meet other people who are interested in startups, entrepreneurship, making an economic impact in the cities that we are in. It's a great way for you to build your network and get to know people who are interested in the same things. And there are a lot of people who end up connecting on LinkedIn or share contact information, become friends through selection day, no matter what the outcomes are after that day, and encourage you to really use that as an opportunity to get to know people who are similar to yourself and hold similar values as well. So in terms of the STAR method, the STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result. And this is a great way for you to, when you're doing your reflection about your experiences, to really articulate them in a way that will resonate with people. So an example of this is in terms of situation, if you had to plan, like myself in college, like a food festival, that was a situation that I was in. My task in that project was to basically source our vendors and to market to students at my college campus to attend this event. So in terms of an action, what I did was send emails and made phone calls with different vendors in my college town to get them to donate or have discounts for food to be sold and basically mostly given away at this food festival as a way for them to grow their business. And then to market the event for students, like sent out emails, put up flyers, did some other marketing campaigns. And for the results, we got like 500 people to attend. And I created a document and process, as well as an Excel spreadsheet to crystallize all the things that I did so that next year's planning would be easier. So you don't have to say situation, task, action, result. I did that to like guidepost and signpost what I was saying. But by using this technique, you're better able to share sort of the results and the resolutions of tasks based on situations that you've been in. So hopefully that was helpful. I'd recommend Googling this, Google your way to victory in terms of the STAR method and STAR technique, so that you are super prepared to talk about yourself and your experiences in selection day, especially in the individual panel interview. So with that, I wanted to move into the fellow spotlight questions that I have for our alums and fellows on the call tonight. and some Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself after the end of the spotlight, or put them in the chat box for me to respond to. But before we move on to that, before I stop sharing my screen, I wanted to remind you all, if you haven't done so already, to register for Selection Day by tomorrow, Thursday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. If you're watching this before, afterwards, if you're not viewing this live, then hopefully you've registered by then. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll get started with the fellow spotlight. So I prepared a few questions for our alumni and wanted to pull them up for myself, and wanted to ask each of you to share sort of a highlight of your experience as a VFA fellow and or an alum for you, Paula, if you want to share anything in your time before or after you finish the fellowship. So I'll leave it to whoever wants to unmute themselves first and dive right in.
I can go first then. Okay, so again, Paula, alum. I would say the highlight of my fellowship, and I've had probably a bunch because I've been in it for 4 years, but honestly, Selection Day was pretty, I know you guys are like, this is in advance of Selection Day, but for me, Selection Day was a really big part of my experience. I was really unsure about, well, I wasn't really unsure, but I was somewhat unsure about Venture for America until Selection Day. And for me, it was really tiring, difficult, challenging, but also some of the most fun I'd had in a long time. And I think it kind of introduced me into the way, I guess, the Venture for America expects a lot of you. And I think that's a really good thing. And I hadn't felt that since college. I worked for a year between graduating and joining Venture for America. And I was really missing this sort of like intellectual, challenging conversation, I guess. And Selection Day for me reminded me of school and reminded me of the kinds of people and the kind of community I was really looking for and had felt lacking in my life. So Selection Day for me was really fun, huge kind of turning point for me in terms of knowing that VFA was going to be a really useful, impactful, positive influence in my life and in my career. And then I would say in addition to that, just to bring it a little more recently, I think Winston mentioned earlier on, before maybe some of you joined the call, that Detroit has a community of over 100 current active fellows and alumni, which is insane because when I moved here, it was about half that. So the community is growing. The alumni are here still. The fellows keep coming. But being a part of that community for 4 years and with no end in sight, I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. Being able to walk around, being able to make connections, meet mutual connections, mutual friends, professional contacts, and being able to lean on that community now through 4 years and 3 jobs for me has been really, really, it's been like a comfort living in a city that I have no personal connection to. I don't have family here. I didn't go to school here. So for me, having that community to support me and kind of like be the foundation upon which I grew my personal and professional life over the last few years has been really awesome, and just something that I think a lot of young college grads don't have and don't realize how much of a boost that could be for them.
Okay, I'd love to hop in next. Molly, Detroit fellow. One of my favorite parts of the experience would be kind of like the strong purpose and values that are part of the Venture for America program. Kind of similar to Paula, I was really nervous like going into Selection Day and kind of worried it'd be this really competitive nature and all these people who like are set on starting their own business, and it was going to be this like weird competitive thing where everybody was in their own heads, and it was honestly complete opposite. And there were people that I met at Selection Day that are still like some of my closest friends in the fellowship, which is like crazy to me. But on top of that, I just felt the values carried and the purpose carried throughout the entire experience, from like the first essays I had to fill out to apply to the types of questions I ask on Selection Day that are more character focused. They're looking for people who are passionate and have drive and have resilience. And that's exactly the type of people who end up in the fellowship. And that in turn just creates this amazing, strong community of people who are there for you no matter what. And that kind of like selfish competitive nature just goes away when you're surrounded by all these people who are so passionate about like their own thing, and everybody in the program is passionate about something, and it's so easy to learn new things all the time from your friends. So that strong like value and mission alignment of really like going into a community, not just for a job, not just for this like glamorized post-grad experience of like getting the best or highest paying job among your friends, but like really being part of a community. And if that like speaks to you in any sort of way, I think VFA is like a great fit. And then also there's something else at training camp. You feel the values again a ton. Like you weren't just getting these professional trainings, you were also getting trainings where we talked about mental health, and we talked about how to move to a city and be like intentional and aware and learn about that place, and not just like go in and be transient and get out. And that to me was something I hadn't even processed or thought about or knew to think about when it came to moving to a new city after college. So the fact that training camp was about so much more than just being professionals, but it was about like kind of the development of like this whole person was really great for me.
Yeah, I also would have to second a lot of what both of them said. I think a big thing, one of the biggest, or one of my favorite parts so far, obviously I've had a much shorter experience in VFA than the other people on this call, but I think one of my favorite things has been just the entire experience in Detroit at training camp. Detroit's an incredible city. It's filled with so much life and so much beauty and so many different niches depending on what you enjoy. So a month was definitely not enough time there, but it was a really great experience to be able to see a new city, really get to know a new place, and also get to know probably one of the most diverse group of people I've ever been a part of. In my class, there were 206 people that were at training camp, and every single person came from a significantly different background than the next. And it was just really incredible to hear people's stories, hear how they got down the path they did to get to VFA and get to all the things they were doing, and just hear some of the things people have done. I mean, I was blown away by some things that people had said that they've done in their lives. I think another thing too is being in a city that I grew up in. I think it's really cool to get to know the fellow class that is also here. So Cleveland now has, I believe, over 100 active and alumni members of VFA. So it's really cool to show people who just moved here different parts of the city that I love, but also I feel like I'm learning so many new places that I never knew about, just because, again, we all have very different niches and very different things that we're involved in and like to do. So I think being able to see a city I love through brand new eyes is one of my favorite things about being a part of the program.
Thank you all. It seems like there's a lot of things around selection day, and that is an opportunity to meet other people, as well as training camp being an opportunity to get to know VFA City, as well as to meet the other people in your class, as well as like professional development. So thank you all for sharing your stories. On the flip side of highlights, I would love to hear maybe some like lowlights or challenges that you've experienced during your fellowship, just so that we can sort of give a little bit more of a 360 view about what the fellowship is like. And so, yeah, would love to hear about challenges and maybe how you worked through that challenge and what that resolution was as well.
I can jump into this one first. So again, not the longest experience in VFA, but I was just telling Winston about this. I've been at my company now for a little over 2 months, and I've already taken on a new role and position, and not a negative challenge, more of a positive. But it was tough that I was still trying to learn about a company and learn how everything works, but also take on an entirely new role and have to jump in and learn that as well. So it's been challenging, but it's been really fun because it's kind of kept me on my toes. Every day in the office is different. I never know what I'm going to get, which is something that I was really hoping for working at a startup. So it's a little bit different than what I guess I was used to, and I think that's why it's been a challenge, but it's been really fun to try and maneuver this, figure it out, and learn as much as I can along the way.
I can go next. I think something that VFA really wants and tries to do is tries to prepare you for, hitting the ground running, taking initiative, contributing and adding value wherever you can in your job or in your, in your company. And when I moved to Detroit, my company wasn't ready for that sort of energy, that vibe. So that was like an initial shock. I was like, wait a minute, I'm prepared. Like VFA trained me at that point. Training camp was 5 years long. Oh my gosh, 5 weeks long. And so those 5 weeks, I was, that was like drilled into us, and I was like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to like stay up all night and come in on weekends or whatever. And my company was like, whoa, like this is gonna take some time. So I think the initial, I'm not sure, misalignment, I guess, of my expectations to what the reality was a little bit of a challenge. I've certainly had a lot of challenges in the last 4 years, as is true of probably anybody. 4 years is a long time. What I think I can be grateful for through all of those is that VFA did everything in their power to prepare me for like as much as they could. They, like Molly was saying, there's so much emphasis on the character building and the personal development and growth that it's kind of like no matter what company, city, industry, job title you have or you're in, you're going to be learning, not just in the fellowship, but in training camp and selection day. You're going to learn at every phase of the experience how to tackle challenges you never would see coming. So, I've left a company I wasn't really happy with. I left a company I loved to work now for the city, which city government, I don't know if anyone's ever heard this before, but city government's really difficult to work in, really bureaucratic and really slow moving. So that's been challenging. The last 5 months I've been doing that. But all of that being said, VFA provided such a strong kind of like foundation of support, like I said before, and emphasis on aspects of like a person that get them through challenging things, all in the end to like contribute, make other people's lives easier, and add value to whatever company or organization you're part of. So I would say nothing that like I couldn't overcome, and I don't really think of them as like hardships per se. I feel like we're doing pretty good all at the end of the day.
I think one of the challenges I faced was when I was first moving to Detroit, getting settled in after training camp. I felt like my transition to full-time work and to the city was a little bit clunky. I had all these expectations on myself to be like excelling at work right away and like close with all my coworkers, and also like volunteering in the community at the end of like month 1. And none of those things happened right away. And it was really hard to like have all these expectations and ideas around like what post-grad and community involvement and like success at work would look like. And then just feeling like it came so much slower. And I felt like every day I was like making a small mistake or learning or embarrassing myself or doing something that was like not the way I wanted it to go. And definitely just having the VFA structure there to help not only personally with like feeling like I was falling down a lot and like having a slower time getting involved in the community than I wanted, but like friends to process that with and talk about things we wanted to get involved with, and how we were going to do that, and maybe hold each other accountable to like go to this community event we found on Facebook. Like that was something I did within the first like month or 2 with a group of fellows that I would have never done like on my own. And then also like the professional side of that as well, like learning how to navigate tough conversations at work, or like expressing when in the first couple months, I didn't really still understand my role or what like my value was to the company, like having someone sit down and come up with ways to have that conversation. So it can be as simple as like going to coffee with some other fellows or someone from Venture for America and being like, hey, I'm dealing with this at work. Like I want to talk about it. I've never navigated this conversation before, and like having that support and guidance in like the clunkiness or whatever like issues you're facing in your transition, like they're there to walk through it with you, which I think is a super rare opportunity to be a part of something like that. And especially like just comparing with friends I have outside of the fellowship and them kind of navigating all these personal and professional challenges like completely on their own. It just really makes a world of a difference to go through it with friends and supporters.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So there's uncertain things that happen. There's a lot of adjustments that happen through VFA, but it sounds like each of you has leaned on sort of the things that training camp has taught you, as well as sort of the other members of the people that you're on this like journey with to navigate those challenges effectively. So thank you. The next question I have for you all is if you could talk about maybe the skills that you've learned or lessons that you've sort of had in terms of your professional growth in your career. Had a lot of questions when people registered for this about like, what will VFA help me with professionally as opposed to quote unquote like traditional career path. So curious to know if you could share a little bit more about the value that you see in working for a startup, which we all know isn't as, structured or sort of filled with as much certainty as it is with like working at a larger consulting firm or a big tech company or like finance or something like that. So curious to know again, what skills you've developed in your time at VFA as a fellow and maybe as an alum that has contributed to your professional growth, transferable skills, all that type of stuff.
I can start off here. I think something that VFA, most fellows are going into working at startup environments, which are by definition, in a lot of cases, like very ambiguous, very nebulous environments. So something that is emphasized is like, you're not always going to know, what you're going to be doing that day, or you're never going to be absolutely certain of like your role, your responsibilities, potentially because of the nature of what a small, fast-paced group of people has to do in order to succeed. So given that, and I'm like a naturally very type A, very like averse to ambiguity and non-structured things. I'm an engineer and a planner, so like I like having structure, I like having rules, and I like having a roadmap for things. VFA kind of like poked and prodded me a little bit to prepare for an environment where that was not going to be the status quo. Now to the point where I've been able to adjust in every professional experience I've had since moving to Detroit has kind of varied on that point. So my first job was a startup of 17 that shrunk to the size of 6 or 7 by the time I left. And that was like dramatic, had dramatic impacts on the nature of the work, the nature of my role, and my contributions to the company. Following that, I was in a very structured, large, kind of like old-fashioned traditional philanthropy environment, which had a very clear onboarding process, very clear rules and regulations. And I was surprisingly struggling against those kind of like structured walls and environments. And now at the city, which you would think of as like a large, massive bureaucracy machine of sorts, I'm kind of back in that, like, everything's too fast paced. The onboarding processes don't really exist. And now I'm trying to figure out how best to bridge the two, how to find a happy medium between like complete nonsense, like no one knows what's going on, and rules and regulations just for the sake of having rules and regulations. So I feel like I've learned a lot. And this applies outside of work too, but just how to be comfortable in ambiguity and how to kind of go like roll with the punches and add structure and add processes where you can and where it makes the most sense, but also know that going with the flow is going to be required in life and in work. And so that's something that I think I'm actually very proud of how much I've learned about that in the last few years. And also too, just to kind of close the loop on that, a lot of I went to MIT, and 9 out of 10 of my friends all went into like banking or consulting or very, very, very structured post-college jobs. And that like ambiguity, roll with the punches environment does not exist in that. Or it's certainly dramatically less common than it would be in a venture firm type experience. So I think we're served better, where at age 26 now, I feel like I've been able to navigate such a dramatically different work environments that my fellow 26-year-olds who have that experience. And myself, like, trading stories with my dad, who's 55, and he's impressed at how much I've learned given, the strange kind of work environments I've had versus other people my age where they've had more of the traditional experience. So just as like a, compare and contrast type of example.
The professional development aspect is like one of my favorite things about VFA. So I'm really excited you asked this, Winston. I actually joined VFA because I really wanted to kind of create this toolbox of like skills and knowledge that I could take to any organization after VFA, whether it was like when I was a senior in high school or in college, I really wanted to do the Peace Corps or like work with an international NGO or one of these very like international global things. And I decided to do VFA because I figured I wouldn't be able to do that work well if I didn't have like these basic skills of how to look at an organization critically. And like Paula was saying, like know how to scale it or how to develop processes. And that's one of the most like highly regarded and highly needed skills out there at any organization, no matter what you want to do, whether it's music or travel or engineering or something in the healthcare field. Like VFA teaches you these skills. It's just literally like this toolbox that you can take anywhere and plug into any organization. And I like certainly had that experience in my year and a half of the fellowship so far, have just taken away so much from both the training camp and the VFA development, but also the development in my particular job. And so my job in Detroit, I was the third person on a business team at a really small jewelry company. And I got to kind of try out and test out all of these different roles, social media, strategy development, marketing, community partnerships, like data analysis. Every area of the business I had some small project in. And that opportunity, I think, is just so rare, because to say that I've kind of dipped my toes in every aspect of a business and I've only been working for a year and a half feels really incredible, and also helps me kind of gear towards which ones I liked the most versus which ones I know that I'm not good at. And that kind of accelerated development taking place over only a year is really incredible. There was somewhere else I wanted to go with this. And then also when this opportunity came up at Cuba Candela, the company I'm transitioning to right now, it's like my third day and I'm on job training right now. But when I was talking with this CEO, it was originally an informational interview because I'm really passionate about Cuba, and we were just talking. And then 3 weeks later, I got a call back that a role had opened. And because I was in Venture for America and he knew the name and had worked with fellows before, he wanted to like work with me directly through a hiring process and see if I would want the role or be a good fit for it. And giving examples of working in every aspect of the company in my Detroit job really impressed him, and was like empowered, like gave me the opportunity to move forward with kind of a dream job. And I don't know if I would have had that ability or that confidence to be able to do that and pivot and go take on this new career that's more in line with my goals. If I didn't have this like really wide array of experiences and really like well-trained skills of adaptability and kind of big picture design thinking that VFA kind of nails into you.
Yeah, in semi-similar to what Molly's saying, I think a big thing for me is that I work on a small team. There are 6 of us in my company, and I have been able to really see a lot more behind the scenes work that maybe I'm not physically working on myself, but I've been able to sit in on meetings that our COO or CEO are having with potential customers or things along those lines, where I'm able to get a better view of the entire picture of what goes into running our business. And I think a lot of what that's taught me for what I want to do later on is it's showing me a lot of things that I really like to do, and a lot of things I really like getting involved in, and that brings me a lot of energy, brings me a lot of joy. But also I'm seeing a lot of things that maybe aren't my favorite, and those aren't the routes that I feel that I can put my best self into. So it's kind of cool to, when you get to put your hands in a lot of different pots, it's really cool to see what sticks and what things, like I said, do bring you joy, what things maybe aren't your strong suits. So I think it's kind of helping me more than anything else, more what my professional goals are, because I think over the past 6 months, they've changed so drastically. And I know they will continue to, but being able to have all of those different experiences is really helping me to mold it and see exactly what it is that I think I want to do longer term, maybe in this job or after this job as well.
Thank you all for sharing. So I think common themes I heard were around learning how to deal with a bunch of different situations and ambiguity, as well as like using or having the experience of building a lot of different skill sets and trying a lot of things out, wearing hats, but also having responsibility to like, add value in those roles. And that can really position you, especially Molly, well, and to like pursue something that she's so excited about in Miami. We'll miss Molly so much in Detroit, but we're also very excited for her to add value and be a part of the Miami community. Speaking of cities, so before I turn it over to any of the finalists for Venture for America to ask their questions either in the chat or unmuting themselves and doing it verbally, is if you could share maybe like a sentence or two about why Detroit or Cleveland are great cities and why they should be excited to do Selection Day in one of our fair towns. I can go first because I live in Detroit too. I did my Selection Day in Detroit. It was the first year that we did a local Selection Day, and the first one is in Detroit. And for me, it was walking around, taking a break during the afternoon before my individual interview and talking to a man who approached me because there was a garage door that said Rebirth of Detroit. And he asked me, he was like, what do you think of that? I was like, I don't know, man, I've been here for like 24 hours. I don't know what that means. I've never been here before. What do you think that means? And we got into this conversation about the downtown versus the neighborhoods in Detroit, which if you're not from here, it's sort of a conversation about investment being in one part of the city, downtown Detroit, and then sort of the neighborhoods being sort of forgotten or left behind, which has a lot more nuance to it than I can like share in this short sort of story. So happy to talk about that when you're in Detroit with me or in Cleveland. But I think it really got me thinking about what kind of city I wanted to be in, what kind of community I wanted to be a part of. And for me, that really sold me in terms of like, I wanted to learn more and be a part of a city that is going through a rebirth of sorts, and who that's for and how that we can make it equitable for people. That's what really drew me to Detroit. So hopefully that gave time for everyone else to share their one or two. I think I said like 5 sentences, so feel free to take up more time.
I know for Cleveland, at least, I think one of my favorite things about the city of Cleveland is the fact that we have a lot of passion for the fact that we live here and for all the things that Cleveland has going on. And if you can't see an example of that, I think the best example is the fact that Browns games still sell out every year. And if any of you are sports fans, you know that we had a perfect season where we didn't win a single game, yet this game still sold out. Like people still wanted to be there. They still wanted to be around everyone, and they still wanted that energy in that community. And that's always what I use as my like example of what Cleveland is that it's just a group of people who truly have so much passion for where they're at and so much passion for the history of the city and want to watch it grow and watch it continue to flourish and have the energy that it's always had. And I think I saw a lot of that in Detroit as well. Don't live there, but I was there for a month. And so I see a lot of those similarities in both of the cities. And I think that's why they're both fantastic places to be.
I think something that I really felt, I think that's something that resonated with me about Detroit before I even moved here was that it only seemed to be brought up in conversation when I was growing up in like really negative ways. And yet it's a city that's home to hundreds of thousands of people. People work here, they live here, they raise their families here, they go to school here, they build things here, they create things here. And they stay and they choose to stay and they choose to live here and thrive. And it's a really beautiful, vibrant community for a lot of reasons. But all of that's overlooked because of the challenges that it faces as a city. And I just feel like there's this constant, I don't really know how to describe it, but there's this like constant, like you can have two conflicting ideas in your head at the same time, you know, like yes, Detroit has like a lot of, you know, bad statistics about it, or, you know, people here struggle, or the, you know, whatever you want to talk about. But at the same time, it's like the Central American city in so many ways too. And it has this really interesting, beautiful like duality to it that I find really fascinating. And that it's only become more and more fascinating the longer I've lived here and the more I've talked to people about it. Working for the city now too, I've been able to kind of better understand those contradicting ideas. And I'm like working for the man with a group of people who don't like that we're the man, but we're like fighting against that every day. So it's been really, really interesting. And I do think that kind of like dual identity is true of not just Detroit, but a lot of the cities that Venture for America is in. And if that conversation or that type of conversation interests you at all, like this is a really wonderful pipeline into communities like that, where you can really investigate and dig into that question a little bit deeper.
Okay, I think Detroit is like one of the most underrated and probably like the most misunderstood city in the US, because everyone thinks it's like a horrible, cold, like dangerous, gray place to live. And those things are just not true. And it's actually been incredible to live here. And Detroit was one of the big highlights that I thought of when Winston asked that question. Like a highlight of the fellowship is Detroit. And living here is kind of like this crash course in community development. And what makes it unique from other cities is there's this constant conversation going on in all parts of the city that you're welcome to join at any time. That's just about these greater topics of community development. What does Detroit want to be? What does the rebirth mean? And I don't find that like constant community, like thought and conversation and engagement with like literal strangers on the street sometimes about like what you want Detroit to be and like what it means. That story was amazing, Winston. Stuff like that happens all the time here. And I think it's so beautiful to live in a place like that challenges you to think and to learn beyond just being a young professional. And I am really, really sad about leaving because Detroit has such a unique community. And the other thing I love about it is it doesn't, like, you can't really like fantasize and fall in love with Detroit overnight. Like it grows on you and builds on you really slowly, and you like accept the city for its flaws. And once you do, it's so easy to fall in love with it, but it takes time, and it takes like a desire to learn and to see the beauty and to like seek to understand, which is something BFA talks about a lot. But just generally, there's so much like music and culture and art and history that exists in Detroit that I think is really cool to engage with as a young person. So
thank you all. If it wasn't clear to everyone who's a finalist, we all have a lot of passion for the cities that we're in. And if you are going to Cleveland, if you're going to Detroit, there's no right or wrong answer. I know there's certain questions I had is like, is there a difference? And the difference is, for Cleveland, there's going to be a demo day, but like really both are opportunities for you to get to know these two really wonderful cities along the Great Lakes that BFA is in. So I'm going to stop there with my questions for everyone, and we want to open up the floor to finalists on the call to ask me any questions or ask our fellows and alumni any questions about their experiences, anything that you want to know. Feel free to message me privately. Looks like someone has done that already, but also to unmute yourself and ask away as well. So I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple of the questions that I had from someone in a private message, and it is about Paula, your comment. And that question for you is about your comment about Detroit as a challenging place to live. And they would like to know what specifically is challenging about living in Detroit.
So I think I might have used that word differently when I used it, in that it faces a lot of challenges. Just Detroit as a city, and the people who live here face challenges like poverty, blight, crime, things that people talk about when they talk about Detroit, unfortunately, a lot of the time align along those challenges. And so that's what I meant, I think, when I said that. Although Detroit is also sometimes a challenging place to live. I mean, it's not like New York or Boston or any of the other cities I grew up going to before I moved here, There's no like 24/7 place. There's like a ton of places to do 24/7, it's a big giant city. Like look at it on a map sometime. It's really, really big. So getting around is challenging. There's no subway. I hate snow. Why I moved to Detroit for that? It's tough. All of those things though, and I could probably think of other things that make it hard to live here, but all of the positives far outweigh and they're the reasons why it's challenging. So whoever asked that question, feel free to dig into that again or deeper if you want more specifics, but hopefully that clarifies a little bit. And I will say, I think anyone you ask, if you're coming to Detroit for selection day, anyone you ask about like what's the worst thing about living here, they're probably going to say something about like the weather or, you know, how you have to drive everywhere, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's like a really amazing place to live.
Thank you, Paula. Another question that I had was, are some cities harder than others to get placed into because they're higher in demand? How is it handled during match? So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to explain the match process to everyone, just in case people don't know, and then I'd love for you all to weigh in on your match process. So the match process is what's going to happen if you do become an incoming fellow starting in April, although we will be preparing you by helping you get your resume startup ready, your polishing up any interview skills if you need support on that, as well as helping you learn about startup jobs that are out there. Because when I joined VFA, I had education and nonprofit experience. I had no idea what an account manager was. I had no idea what a product manager did. So part of our goal before match starts in April is to get you ready for that process. It's driven by you, like most things in VFA, you have to be proactive and drive that process of learning for yourself. But on April, I think 6th is when we will launch this private job portal that's just for incoming class of fellows. So nothing that any of the fellows on this call can access. And then you'll be able to pitch different opportunities that we've sourced in our cities. So the demand and how hard it is to be in certain cities really depends on so many factors. So it wouldn't be fair to me to share with you like a percentage or a likelihood, just because it really depends on how many cities or companies have opportunities that are available in those cities. It depends on your interest in that city, as well as like how you do in those interviews with those companies. So we've used this match portal to connect you, a fellow, and our company partners. And if you match with them, if there's a mutual interest, then we're pretty hands-off, and it's up to the company to interview a fellow. We want it to be as much of a good fit for them as it is for you. So it really depends on a lot of things. So it's hard for me to answer like how hard it is for some cities. I will say that if there's a city that has fewer opportunities for whatever reason, like we don't control the market forces of jobs in these cities. We're a nonprofit organization, one of the many players in these entrepreneurial ecosystems. Then yeah, I mean, there might be more like people wanting to find jobs in like a city that doesn't have as many opportunities, and because of that, there might be a lower likelihood of you ending up there. We always encourage fellows to be pretty flexible and open-minded when it comes to things, just because there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I talk to fellows who go to one of our job fairs in a city like Birmingham, and they're matched with a company that they had no idea about, and they actually like didn't really want to talk to. But after a 20-minute conversation, they're like, oh, I didn't realize that this would be a cool opportunity for me, that the team is really cool. Thank you for putting me in this conversation with them, because I would have never realized that. So we've done this match process with more than 1,000 people in our program, so we know our stuff. And it's always about being flexible and open. So would love to open it up to any fellows who want to share about their match experience and how they navigated that as well. And feel free to keep on sending me questions.
I can hop in. So I think match process is complex because there's so many factors you pick a job based on. And VFA, in case this wasn't clear, like we don't place you in a city or like choose your job for you. You have complete autonomy to pick where you apply. And then it's also in the hands of the employers as well. So it's just like any other regular interview process, where it's between you and the employer, and if there's a mutual desire for them to give you an offer and for you to accept. I would say if there is, for some reason, a specific city you're really interested in, whether you have a passion for it or family there, like by all means, you could focus your search on that city specifically and just like be really passionate about it and explain it to the employers, and like your chances of being there are probably high. But there's so many different ways to do the job search and lots of different things to consider. And so for me, like it was more about the industry and the job role than location. So not everybody in VFA or the match process is going to be like trying to choose a job just based on cities. So cities, I wouldn't say the cities like max out or like fill up, or some fill up faster than others, because there's so many different elements and aspects of like choosing a job or just like getting a job offer in the first place that go deeper than location. So if that's the fear, I wouldn't say they just like fill up super fast and then like New Orleans is full, no more. And there's always kind of more things being added to match. My company, I spent all of April searching and doing these interviews that just like were not successful. And my company didn't even join the match portal until like mid-May. So that wasn't even there when I first joined. So things are constantly being added, and there's always like more fresh opportunities as time goes on.
I want to jump in a little bit too. So I've been a part of, the selection process for 3 years now. And I always give this advice, whether or not it's solicited, to, barring like major familial obligations or majorly important variables that require you to focus on a specific industry or a specific city, avoid doing that as much as possible, only because those at the end of the day will not be the most important factors in your job happiness and your ability to enjoy and learn from your work. I basically pinpointed Detroit from the minute I started Venture for America, and I pinpointed the industry right away. And I ended up working in a company that checked both of those boxes, and ended up leaving because of like culture misalignments that I think if I had done a better job in the interview process, I could have brought those to the surface sooner rather than when I did. I'm not like regretful of any of the choices I made. I loved working there when I did, and I loved being in Detroit at the early part of my fellowship. But culture and management style and how that matches and how you work with those people for a third of your day every day is going to be far and above like the most impactful part of whether or not you're happy every day at your work. And I realized I needed to leave when my unhappiness at work spilled out into being unhappy outside of work. And anyone who talked to me at any point of the day, I was just complaining about work, which is like a really terrible type of situation to be in. And so I think I really encourage everyone to be as open-minded as you're able to. Like Molly said, if you have family someplace or you have commitments outside of job that dictate, or you're like really, really, you have really specific industry focus that kind of like dictates your job search, that's very fine and understandable. And VFA will support you no matter what. But if you can be flexible, please be flexible, because at the end of the day, it's the relationships and the culture and the environment in which you're working that will dictate how successful you feel your fellowship will be.
Yeah, and to chime in really quickly before Anna, if you have anything to add, is that if fellows do transition, the VFA team is there to coach you through things. And I mean, everything's on a case-by-case basis. Like, we're not going to intervene and be like, here's your new job. You do have to work hard for that. It's not something that we will sort of just like hand you. And the other thing too is that if you are really, really set on like one industry, like you almost always have to be flexible about the role that you would have and the city that you would be in, just based on like how the job markets in our cities work. So wanted to add more context to that as well.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm based in Minneapolis. I'm really excited. I'm one of the finalists. So Paula, you mentioned a bit about hesitancy, and a few other of you have mentioned about sort of hesitancy before going through the full VFA program. I kind of want to know a little more about the sort of process and what were those things that made you pause before selection day or before any of the major points in the interview process, and why? I'm trying to like think through what that process and what those decision factors were for you or for all of you or for whoever.
Thanks for the question. And before the fellow and alumni panelists answer, I want to let you know that it is almost 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So if you do have to go, feel free to head out. Want to be respectful of people's time, but I'll be on here for a little bit longer and would love for fellows to be on here longer. But just wanted to flag that for everyone, to be sensitive to people's time. But go ahead and answer it.
I can jump in. So this is Paula. I think I can only speak to my own specific reasons for being hesitant, or pivot my answer if I'm not answering it directly enough. But I was working abroad when I came across Venture for America through like random articles online. And I was really unhappy in the job I was in after college. I was working in Paris. I had no community. I had no friends. I barely knew the language. I was like basically on my own completely. And I found Venture for America, and I was like very intrigued and very curious about the like multiple columns of like multiple aspects of the VFA mission, like the city aspect and the entrepreneurship aspect and the business, development aspect. But I was still hesitant because I wasn't sure if there were going to be people with my exact background or interests or ambitions, I guess, in the fellowship, and I didn't want to be like the odd man out. And I think going to selection day and meeting the dozens of other finalists that were there, as well as members of the team and VFA supporters who volunteer their time to participate in selection day, meeting all of those different groups of people and asking questions and talking for the entire day, kind of assuaged my fears, because I realized that there's no like one perfect way to be a fellow or one perfect way to go through the fellowship. So there's room for a diverse set of backgrounds, interests, expertises, passions, curiosities. There's room for all sorts of different types of people in Venture for America. If that fundamental mission alignment is there, you can build a really awesome fellowship experience for yourself. So I think once I understood that, and once I was comforted, and once I kind of like made that realization, I was all in on VFA. I was like, I really hope I get that call from the CEO and they tell me I'm in the fellowship, because it's like what I want. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I have one from the chat, and that is, what, if anything, do you feel like you have forgone by choosing the fellowship over a traditional route?
I can answer this one. Or actually, Anna, you go ahead.
Thanks. I think the biggest thing that I can say so far that I've foregone is a bit of stability. Like I said, when I go into office, I have no idea what the day is going to look like every day. It's not that, yes, I'm a customer success manager, but some days I'm doing event planning, some days I'm doing marketing, helping with operations. I never really know what it'll be. So it's not like my role is 100% clear cut and that it's one thing every single day. And with that too, us being a small team, sometimes you have to put in the extra hours, and sometimes you do have to work maybe some funky days, and it's not the very typical 9 to 5 Monday to Friday every single week. So I think that's something that you would get over maybe a more traditional route. But again, that was something I was looking for, especially with a smaller team, the kind of scrappier work. And I do also love being able to have that position as well.
I've had a lot of conversations around this with one of my friends who's in Columbus. He's a 2018 fellow as well, who works in a very similar sized team to me. We both joined on and we were like the third person on the team. And we used to talk a lot about how we would like see our friends on Instagram like taking these amazing trips like around the world, and not that you can't travel, like you definitely can, always recommend that, but we were both in such small startups that we were working a lot of weekends. We were putting in a lot of longer hours, and kind of having like less barriers with our companies and our lives. And we talked about how even though that was hard, we gained so much value from seeing our effort and our thoughts and opinions directly impact a company, and how rare it is to see something you express in a meeting or some sort of feedback you give your boss like actually impact the company, and see your company change and shape and mold based on your input or an idea you contribute. And so it's interesting because sometimes post-grad life can be glamorized. Like you see people in these like amazing like apartments in LA or New York and traveling around the world, and there's no reason that you can't be in VFA and still, do those things on long weekends, or always advocate like taking your PTO, but it just is a different route. It's, and not to say every startup has weekend hours, or not to say every startup your boss is going to be texting you. Like, that's not the case. It's very unique to my experience and like the size of my team. But there's definitely like just a loss sometimes of like structure, and a loss sometimes of like that glamorized idea of being like a young professional today, I guess. But the experience that you get in place of that is so valuable and so amazing, and so community oriented and very challenging. And I never feel like I'm in my comfort zone. I feel like I'm always being pushed to grow. And even when I have like a routine for my week, there's still like random events that my VFA friends will invite me to. And I'm like, oh yes, that sounds amazing. I want to go learn about like food deserts in Detroit. And so you constantly have these things that are popping up and challenging you to grow and learn. And that's definitely what I was looking for outside of school. And Venture for America definitely gives you that type of experience.
Yeah, I think something I thought about recently, living in Detroit and having gone to school and grown up on the East Coast, we're in the Eastern time zone, but we're kind of like, we're still several hours away from things. Like, all my friends from college are a flight away, all my family's at least a flight away. And it can feel a little bit distant or isolating in that sense. But, and this is a really big but, like Molly was saying, all of the like downsides come with like a major upside that outweighs it. Being able to show and like introduce Detroit in a lot of ways to people who have never been here and like don't know anything about it has been some of the most fun times I've had since I've lived here for 4 years. Like, having my dad visit me and being able to walk around and take him amazing places to eat and teach him about the architecture of downtown and drive around and show him all the history and the historic parts of the city. It was like life-changing for him. And he's, like a fully grown, like smart person. My young professional friends who have a little bit more disposable income, for example, who have traveled to places and maybe have more of that like glamorized version of what it is to be unprofessional. They come to Detroit, they see where I live, they see my friends, they meet my community here, and they're like blown away at all that we've been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time, given the size of the city, the impact of our community, and the, like the access that we're given by virtue of being a part of this network. So those like slightly like isolating moments where I'm like, man, I wish I could just go home and visit my family this weekend, is made all the better when I can have them come to Detroit and I can show them my life here, and they're just fascinated and blown away. So I definitely think any of those things you forego, there's like a really heavy upside that you get living in a VFA city that you wouldn't get in another experience.
Thank you all for sharing. All right, any other questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so gonna pause for a few seconds to see if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining. If you're a finalist, I will see you in Cleveland or Detroit. I'll be at both of those selection days, so please do come say hi to me if you're on the live call or if you're watching this later. And if you have any other follow-up questions or want to dig deeper into the things that that came up during the call tonight, feel free to talk to the fellows who will be at Cleveland and Detroit selection days, or me. And thank you all, Molly, Anna, and Paula, for taking time out of your days to join us. Hopefully it was helpful to everyone who was on the call to hear from their perspectives, their stories, which, as you probably could tell, are unique to them, and everyone has their own experience, but hopefully helpful as you're approaching selection day and reflecting about why VFA makes sense for you. So thank you all so much for joining, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.